Ukraine conducted arguably the most audacious and successful sabotage operation of this war in June 2025. In general, in this period, we saw the increased frequency of Ukrainian sabotage operations, and such asymmetric targeting of the Russian military seems like a smart bet at a time when the balance of conventional military capacities appears to be in Russia's favor. Ukraine hopes that its asymmetric and reputation-weakening attacks will cause disruptions for Russia at home and harm its overall ability to maintain strategic initiative on the battlefield. Let's look at the most important events of the war in Ukraine from June 2025 in this video. Every week, we release 3 new exclusive videos for our members and patrons. The Pacific War, the Eastern Front of World War II Prelude, and many other series, including the War of Spanish Succession, Punic Wars, Iberian Reconquista, Russian Revolution and Civil War, North African and Italian campaigns of World War II, and much more. It has been long overdue, but we have finally created a YouTube channel exclusively for our Kings and Generals podcasts. Please go and check out Kings and Generals podcast, home to the Pacific War Week by Week podcast and the Fall and Rise of China podcast, link in the description and pinned comment. To see those, as well as get access to our exclusive Discord, see our schedule, and get early access to all videos, join the ranks of our patrons and YouTube members via the links in the description and pinned comment. Thanks to our supporters for allowing us to continue doing our dream job. Throughout June, Russia has been in the midst of its umpteenth grand offensive. The story is the same. The Russian army has a manpower advantage throughout the battlefield. The vast majority of their attacks are infantry assaults, which lead to massive losses, but sometimes result in territorial advances. The biggest difference is that a few months ago, Russia used armored vehicles and tanks to transport their troops to the zero line and offer them fire support. But slow-moving tanks and vehicles are easy targets for Ukrainian drones, and to conserve them for future operations, the Russians have increasingly been relying on motorcycles and buggies for infantry and supply transportation. Moreover, recent reports from Ukrainian and Western sources suggest that Russia has gained an upper hand in drone warfare, thanks to a higher rate of production and successful use of fiber-optic drones. This may be true, but Ukraine is still heavily reliant on its drones for defensive operations, as they continue to struggle with manpower shortages, even despite the decisions of the Ukrainian government to lower the mobilization age in 2024. The total number of Russian and Ukrainian troops stationed in Ukraine is comparable, but since Ukraine has to keep some of its units in the rear and on inactive fronts, it ends up with fewer troops in the sectors where the Russians are attacking. The Russian army is attempting to capitalize on this situation by opening new fronts and extending the already undermanned Ukrainian lines. Additionally, there is considerable criticism online regarding the state of Ukrainian fortifications. In June, we saw footage of anti-tank pyramids lying on the side of the road without being properly installed somewhere in the Sumy Oblast, and it was widely speculated for months that Russia was intending to launch another offensive on Sumy. But for some reason, at times Ukrainian defensive lines are inadequate to the level of threat offered by Russia. This was the case in Kharkiv Oblast, and now we are seeing it in Sumy. Russia has established a foothold in Sumy Oblast since February 2025, and in early June it advanced along the frontier. They expanded their salient to Yunikivka, Volodyahi, Oleksivka, and Kindrativka, and heavy battles are ongoing in Yunikivka as we speak. The Ukrainians have managed to stabilize the situation in Sumy Oblast since early June, but Russia will likely continue putting pressure on Ukrainian defenses here. Along the river Oskil, the Russian attempts to change the situation do not stop. In June, they captured Dvorichna, solidifying their bridgehead on the western bank of the Oskil. To the south, they have gained ground towards Karpivka and in Bilohorivka. But the main focus of Russian operations is on the line stretching from Toretsk to Velikina Vasilka. Here, they have conducted several successful attacks in June to capture more territory. In the Toretsk sector, in early June, they captured Delivka and Dachna to the east of Toretsk. To the west, the Russians made a considerable advance between Romanivka and Novoolenivka, capturing Nativka, Stara Mikolaivka, and Zoria in the process. Russia has also solidified its control over the TO504 highway, a key supply line between Pokrovsk and Kostiantynivka. North of the highway, they advanced on Popiv Yar and Koptyeva and captured Malinivka in June. To the southwest of Pokrovsk, the Russian army has made westward progress from Udachna to Bahyta. This is the area where Russian progress has been most consistent in recent months. Lastly, Russian units have achieved minor breakthroughs in the Velikina Vasilka sector, reaching Kama and Zaporizhia in June. At least some Russian recon units have crossed the administrative border of Donetsk and Dnipropetrovsk oblasts. This does not mean much from a purely military perspective, since this advance does not indicate an imminent offensive inside Dnipropetrovsk Oblast, and the current Russian presence should be interpreted within the framework of its operations in Donbas. Nevertheless, the presence of the Russian army in another oblast gives Putin political options, as he may choose to lay a legal claim over Dnipropetrovsk Oblast as well, however dubious and illegal it may be. Another military advantage that Russia still possesses is its long-range strike capability. In June, they conducted several large-scale air attacks. The June 16th attack was particularly deadly. The Russians launched more than 440 Shahed drones and more than 30 missiles, and almost half of them targeted Kyiv. At least 15 people were killed in this horrific attack. According to Ukrainian intelligence, Russia currently produces 170 domestically modified Shahed drones per day, which has allowed them to launch 300 to 400 Shaheds and several missiles a couple of times a week, depleting Ukraine's air defense arsenal. More air defense systems, with a sufficient arsenal of air defense missiles, is key for Ukraine at this point in the war. Ukraine needs more conventional air defense systems, and new systems specifically designed to counter large swarms of Shahed or Shahed-like drones, a system which would be economically viable to use against very cheap Shahed drones. In June, Ukraine's defense minister Umerov announced that an unspecified European company will start the production of anti-Shahed missiles in Ukraine. But the currently ongoing war between Israel and Iran has made its mark on Ukraine's air defense capabilities, among other things too. After the start of hostilities, the Pentagon announced that it was sending APKWS guidance kits, procured through the Ukraine Security Assistance Initiative, to the Middle East. According to Zelensky, these were 20,000 anti-Shahed missiles, which would have been really helpful for Ukraine at this point. But obviously the United States considers the protection of its interests in the Middle East and the protection of Israel in particular as a higher priority. Generally speaking, even if the war between Israel and Iran had not started, the United States was already on the course of decreasing its participation in Ukraine. It is beyond reasonable doubt that Trump's attempt to end the war in Ukraine rapidly in a single diplomatic cavalry charge has failed. We have stated on numerous occasions that there is a chasm between Ukraine and Russia's vision of an acceptable end to this war. Kyiv is ready to accept a ceasefire and Russia's de facto control over the occupied territories, in exchange for security guarantees. But Russia insists on de jure recognition of its sovereignty over all illegally annexed territories, even those which are controlled by Ukraine, along with demanding a smaller army, no peacekeepers, and a neutral status for Ukraine. Basically nothing that could stop Putin from attacking Ukraine once again if he feels like it. Some speculate that Russia is making these harsh demands as a starting point in talks, and there is room for negotiations. But statements coming from Russia tell a different story. Russia continues to insist on eliminating the so-called root causes to stop the war in Ukraine. The root cause is former socialist countries of Central and Eastern Europe choosing to join NATO to protect themselves from Russia. It is easy to see how it is a non-starter for NATO and the post-1997 NATO members. Furthermore, on June 20th, Putin stated that since Ukrainian people are the same as Russians, the whole of Ukraine is Russia's. This may be seen as a tongue-in-cheek remark by some, but if you follow Putin's statements on Ukraine, you would recognize that the Russian president does not take Ukraine's sovereignty seriously and considers the very existence of the state of Ukraine an egregious mistake by Russia, which he intends to fix. Russia uses diplomacy only to pursue its goal of destroying Ukraine and sees Kyiv's capitulation as the end goal of its war. Thus, in hindsight, with where things stand now, Trump's attempts to end the war were doomed to fail, unless Ukraine was going to accept capitulation. But the situation on the battlefield absolutely does not dictate that Kyiv agree to the Kremlin's maximalist demands. So, in the absence of a viable diplomatic path, Trump could have chosen to increase pressure on Putin via more military support to Ukraine and more robust economic sanctions, or to seek an exit from their role as Ukraine's main military supporter. It looks like Trump has chosen the latter option. According to a Wall Street Journal report, the incumbent administration has been pressuring Senator Lindsey Graham, the main figure behind the new bill of sanctions against Russia, to weaken its language and provisions. US officials have indicated openly and implicitly that they think the war in Ukraine is mostly Europe's problem, and European countries would need to step up, while the Americans gradually decrease their participation. And since Russia's victory would cause a grave and obvious threat to Europe's security, they intend to continue supporting Ukraine, although there is still criticism of the pace and the amount of European deliveries to the Ukrainian army. Currently, the main focus is drones and artillery ammunition to help the Ukrainians maintain defense at a time when they are suffering from manpower shortages, and the investment into Ukraine's domestic military production capabilities to increase its independence in terms of weapons. In early June, Britain announced that it will send 100,000 drones to Ukraine in 2025, on top of 140,000 artillery shells they have already given this year. At the June 4th to 5th Ramstein meeting, Norway pledged $7 billion worth of aid to Ukraine in 2025, including drones worth $700 million. The French Defense Minister Le Cornu announced that several unnamed French companies will start producing drones for Ukraine. The Ukrainian Defense Minister Umerov announced that Denmark, Sweden, Canada, Norway and Iceland will donate €428 million to purchase Ukrainian-produced weapons for the Ukrainian army. The expectation is that €1.3 billion will be raised for this initiative. Germany has announced its intention to partner up with Ukraine to manufacture long-range missiles. On June 21st, Zelensky announced that Ukraine was planning to sign agreements under the Build with Ukraine program, which envisages Ukraine producing weapons and equipment, including drones, missiles and artillery, in the territory of allied countries. The aforementioned pledges of European officials may be part of this program. We do not know if Ukraine's allies have assisted with the recently announced and possibly tested new Ukrainian Sapsan ballistic missile, but it is notable that after years of delays and procrastination with regard to the delivery of Western-made long-range missiles, Ukraine is now reportedly producing its own. Ukraine continues receiving military assistance from its allies, which is extremely important for Ukraine to keep the Russians at bay. But at this point, Russia has an advantage in conventional warfare and has been very slowly grinding its way forward in battles over the past 2 years of war of attrition. This forces Ukraine to look at asymmetrical and hybrid methods of hurting Russia in order to ensure strategic parity. And in June, Ukraine carried out its arguably biggest and most important sabotage operation, badly damaging Russia's strategic aircraft reserves, and perhaps more importantly, its reputation. On June 1st, the Ukrainian Security Service, SBU, conducted the audacious Operation Spiderweb, facilitating almost simultaneous FPV drone strikes on 4 Russian airbases housing strategic bombers. Ukraine has been preparing for this operation for more than 18 months. Ukrainian saboteurs managed to bring in trucks with dozens of FPV drones placed in containers through the border into Russia. In cases where the Russian border patrol smelled a problem, the Ukrainians simply bribed them to let the trucks pass, according to the SBU. More quadricopters were assembled in Russia. On the day of the operation, roofs of trucks parked near the Belaya, Olynya, Diaghilevo and Ivanovo airbases were opened, letting out 117 FPV drones, each operated remotely by a human being, to attack their targets. The SBU claimed the destruction of more than 40 Russian aircraft and 34% of Russia's strategic cruise missile carriers. The Ukrainians may be exaggerating the total number of destroyed Russian aircraft, but we have seen footage and satellite images of more than a dozen hits, including at least 7 Tu-95 strategic bombers, 4 Tu-22M3 strategic bombers, 1 AN-12 transport plane, and 2 A-50 early warning planes. Russia is currently not producing Tu-22M3 and Tu-95 bombers, which means that restoring the damage will take years, if not decades. Ukraine's ability to carry out such a marvelous operation deep in Russia demonstrates that Kyiv has the capability to hurt Russia, including in places it does not expect. The success of Operation Spiderweb sent the Russian pro-war online community into deep soul-searching and anger at the lack of proper protection for the country's strategic assets, and incredulity at the SBU's ability to transport numerous drone-containing trucks through the border into Russia and carry out preparations inside Russia for more than a year without being detected. This is not the first time that Ukraine has badly damaged Russia's reputation in this war. They have destroyed Russia's Black Sea flagship, Moskva. They have struck the Kerch Bridge several times, including just recently in June, with the help of naval drones, and they have killed several Russian military commanders in Ukraine and Russia. In June, they destroyed an Iskander ballistic missile launcher for the first time in this war. Ukrainian sources have claimed that one of their F-16 jets shot down a Su-35 jet in June. While social media footage of a destroyed Su-35 jet confirms that this Russian aircraft was shot down in June, if it was indeed done by an F-16, it would be the first air-to-air kill of a Su-35 by an F-16 in history. The Ukrainian military command has also stated that they destroyed a train transporting equipment for the Russian army on June 7th. They claim the elimination of 13 tanks and more than 100 armored and other types of vehicles. These are different types of operations requiring different types of preparation and forces to achieve success. But the common theme in all these successful operations and strikes is that Ukraine recognizes the value of damaging Russia's military prestige and regularly conducts hybrid and conventional operations to degrade Russia's ability to maintain its war of aggression in Ukraine. According to the Ukrainian General Staff, the Russian losses have surpassed the threshold of 1 million people. Many independent analysts corroborate these numbers, and all that for the occupation of an additional 0.4% of Ukraine's total territory in 2024 and 0.2% in 2025. One cannot help but wonder when and if the Russian public or the elite will start asking difficult questions from the Kremlin. Are all these deaths and losses over destroyed villages and scorched earth really worth it? Lastly, let's look at the visually documented equipment losses suffered by both parties as of June 24th, brought to you by the Oryx blog. Russia has lost at least 4,053 tanks, 10,003 vehicles, 302 command posts and communication stations, 2,069 artillery systems and vehicles, 158 aircraft and 156 helicopters. Ukraine has lost at least 1,203 tanks, 4,747 vehicles, 53 command posts and communication stations, 945 artillery systems and vehicles, 108 aircraft and 51 helicopters. Further updates on the Russian invasion of Ukraine are on the way. If you don't want to miss them, make sure you are subscribed and have pressed the bell button to see them. Please consider liking, subscribing, commenting and sharing, it helps immensely. Our patrons and YouTube members can watch more than 200 exclusive videos. Join their ranks via the link in the description or by pressing the join button under the video to watch these weekly videos, learn about our schedule, get early access to our videos, access our private Discord, and much more. This is the Kings and Generals channel, and we will catch you on the next one.